Next up in my weapon series is going to be Hector's weapon. Now, I suspect this might be one of the more noteworthy weapons I go over in this series because, in my experience, in situations like this, for example, where players are running triple weakness, they have Jaime, the three healers, and then one more commander. This is one of the more common questions I've been asked historically in the past year since I've came back to the game at least. It's whether you should run Hector or Patelo in that fifth spot in Spearfront triple weakness. And whilst I'll primarily be going into the details of Hector's weapon here, I will analyze him somewhat deliberately with this comparison in mind. At the time of recording, of course, Patelo's weapon isn't yet released, so certain talking points could change, but I'm sure I'll release a Patelo weapon video when his eventually comes out also. So I have here all the details of Hector's awakening, Hector's weapon, examples of him in reports. Everything you should want to know should be here on the screen right now. So at the top, this is his awakening stats. At max, he's at 90% spear attack, 92% spear defense, and 50% cavalry health reduction. And then below is his awakening effect at base 4-star, and then all the stages of his weapon listed to the right of that as well. So his effect as far as functionality goes remains the same. He has effectively three components to it. He has the heal, first of all, and that heal will then also become weakness attack damage. And Hector is unique in that he can hit into dead zones of other healing sources to potentially increase your damage. So there's the first two components, and then finally he has this lineup attack by a certain percentage, which will increase all the way up as you gain stars in the weapon also. That lineup attack increase is very simple in its functionality. You can see it here at the bottom. As soon as those first actives cast against you hit, you'll then heal on the same second, and then attached to that heal, you'll also have this attack percentage increase that will happen immediately, and it will affect all lineups that were hit by those actives and therefore healed by Hector's awakening ability, and this will last throughout the entire fight as well. So the attack percentages, I won't really analyze too much and will sort of be an afterthought in a lot of this analysis, but they are very significant. So a 4-star Hector weapon, for example, if you are playing into a female lineup and they have a Selma, and you heal on the first second against their Selma, and then your whole spear line has plus 50% attack increase for the entire fight, that effectively brings Hector's passive spear attack up to 140%, which is obviously higher than anything else in the game can actually provide you as far as passive spear attacks go. So fundamentally, as a stat provider, Hector will always be very, very strong with that. The part of his ability, which I imagine most players have a bit of a hard time visualizing and comparing against other options, will be the heal effect. So I've tried to list out here in this chart exactly what you're going to be getting from this heal in total. When reading these numbers, remember that it's based off commander damage, but potentially an easier way to think of it and visualize it is 100% here would be one normal attack. So ranging from his worst case to his best case scenario, it's somewhere between healing 6.5 normal attacks to 12.5 normal attacks. There will be a lot of variables in terms of how much this actually heals in practice. So for example, in these screenshots to the side I have, you see here, this buffs the spear attack by 50%. That means the Hector weapon is 4-star. So the heal is at 80%, but it only heals 14k spearmen. Whereas below, it's a 30% spear attack increase, so it's only a 1-star Hector weapon, but he heals 45k spearmen there. So there'll obviously be a lot of things that can vary fight to fight. If they have 5 infantry commanders, for example, and you're running mono spear, they'll do significantly more commander damage to you, so Hector will heal more because of that than he would compared to, say, 5 cav commanders. As far as these numbers go, when I actually anecdotally compared them to the effectiveness of what Patelo's damage reduction would provide when you're accounting for uptime as well, Hector is actually quite consistently, even at these base awakening levels, better in terms of how much damage he effectively prevents with his heal, which honestly surprised me. It's not a huge difference at these base levels, and I imagine, of course, when Patelo's weapon comes out, he will also scale up in some way, shape, or form, just like Hector does with his weapon also. But I did expect Patelo's damage reduction to be better than Hector's heal, but Hector was actually marginally above. And that actually puts this whole debate of Hector versus Patelo in a very difficult position, I'd say, and I think they've done a very, very good job at balancing those two commanders because it's actually a very difficult decision. So Hector, obviously, because of how he counters Salma and her damage snowball, will always be better against female than Patelo, preventing that female build from getting a huge numbers advantage early, so you have less troops to deal damage with throughout the rest of the fight, is very significant. So Hector pulls ahead there. But as you see here in the right, as I've stated, Hector obviously only procs against active abilities. So against bleed lineups, if people are running Sonara in any way, Hector can't trigger, which means his heal doesn't trigger, you don't get weakness damage from him, and you don't get this attack increase either. So because of that, Patelo will always be better against bleed, and dramatically better against bleed than Hector will be. But Hector, because of him testing just a little bit better in terms of the damage he prevents, I think marginally tests better if you're spear front against weakness, actually. So it sort of depends on what your priorities are here. For me, at least, if I were thinking of this, you sort of have two options. If you're running that triple weakness build, you can, one, sort of just wave the white flag at your counter, say, I'm spear front, I'm going to get demolished by bleed anyway. I'm going to try and maximize how well I perform against my mirror in spear versus spear, and run Hector because of that, because he seems to be a little bit better into that. But in deciding that, you would effectively just be totally forfeiting the bleed matchup. Or you could decide to run Patelo because he's more versatile, because he works against all three synergy types. There'll obviously be variables with the stats you want if you're running Inf in any way, to any large degree. Of course, Patelo will pull ahead naturally just because of the Inf attack there, but if we're primarily spear focused, it's honestly a very tricky decision. I would expect Patelo to pull ahead when his weapon comes out. I think I personally would still run Patelo and just put Hector's weapon on him for the spear base stack if I had it, of course. But that decision is a very much personal preference thing, I believe. I'm not sure there's really a right or wrong answer to Hector or Patelo. And it may just come down to what do you face the most? Do you face more spear weakness mirrors? Then maybe run Hector instead. Do you face a lot of bleed and you're potentially strong enough to still win some of those bleed matchups, even if they have the counter on you? Then Hector won't perform as well as Patelo in those scenarios. So that's his attack percentage covered, his heal covered there. The last thing is the weakness attack damage you'll gain from him. In that triple weakness situation I posed, all these heal timings will be consistent across those three commanders. So if you have their weapons, they will heal at 11 seconds. If you don't have their weapons, they'll heal at 15 or 14. Hector will heal on the first actives cast. So against Salma, that means he'll heal on the first second, and against weakness, he will heal on the 11th second. Against bleed, of course, he won't heal at all at any point. So through Hector, you can actually gain additional weakness attack damage, which does come into play here in terms of deciding should you run Hector or should you run Patelo. He's the only commander that can give you consistent weakness damage in this first 5-6 second area. The issue is primarily this time will mostly be lost to movement. You'll find that ultimate tournament reports start attacking a little bit earlier, about the 3-4 second mark. But in AC situations, in world PvP situations, particularly when the wall is involved, pretty much all this healing time and all the weakness time will be lost to movement. When there's no wall, though, in AC, in UT especially, you will get at least a couple of seconds of damage in there, which does play a part. You will gain damage through that. You will increase your weakness attack stacks. and you can heal into this Drake Enzo Lat's dead zone if they don't have their weapon attached. Whip him into weakness as well. So again, you can gain weakness stacks, you can gain damage through Hector's healing timing there. All in all, as far as his weapon goes, it's okay. The heal increase from his base awakening to 4-star will prevent somewhere, depending on how buff their actives are, from say Flaming Throne or Strong Assault, somewhere between 4 and 5 normal attacks worth of damage. The fact that it's early damage, so snowball damage, does matter though. So it's a bit more important to heal that damage that is listed. You will gain damage through the attack increases, and they do last the whole fight. You will heal into weakness dead zones, which will help increase your weakness damage. I don't think it's a top tier weapon. I don't think it's as good as the likes of, say, Rhea, that's in a bit of a similar position in the bleed synergy. Spear does somewhat have limited options right now until Patelo's release, at least, of easily accessible spear weapons, particularly if you're just looking for base attack sources. So Hector's weapon is very popular to spear players because of that. If you're running those mid-spender triple weakness setups, I would put some thought into what your priorities are. Do you want to perform better against other spear weakness players, or do you want to perform a bit better against bleed as your counter? I would myself, again, choose Patelo personally, purely because Hector doesn't work at all against bleed, and Patelo at least works against all 3 synergy types, even if he's a bit less optimal against female and weakness. At least he does still work. But there is no necessarily wrong answer there. If you have both in your lineup, of course, just run both in double or single weakness lineups. That's totally fine. They're both good commanders. But there's very much a decision to be made there if you only have room for one. And yeah, that's that. That is Hector's weapon.